On the Track is a monthly web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues, and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
In the 1930s, a remote farmhouse in Cashan's Gap on the Isle of Man became the focus of weird events. Following a poltergeist outbreak, a small strange creature appeared. The Irving family, who owned the house, heard the animal speak. It claimed to be a mongoose called Jeff, who had been born in India in 1852. Jeff haunted the family for almost a decade and became world famous. He was even mentioned in the British Parliament. Although the house at Cashan's Gap was demolished in 1971, Jeff remains a Fortean icon to this day.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's me, Barry Tadcaster, back again. And this is my old mate, Jeff the Talking Mongoose. I'm the eighth wonder of the world, me. Thou shalt never know what I am. I already know what you are, you're a talking mongoose. Oh, that's by the by, I was born in New Delhi in 1852. Hey, well, you've aged quite well, ain't you, mate? Oh yes, oh yes. Well, Jeff, what's occurring this week? Do you believe in big, strong daddy legs? And do you believe in bad flying aeroplanes? Well, you will rejoice in believing in a dog like Sparky.
Now that's what I call sophisticated.
I really like the old credits.
Here we are, it's Sunday morning, and as we quite often do, Richard and I are talking about books. So we got Carl to go up to the library and bring down 3 books at random for us to have a look at and give you our worldly wisdom on the subject of. And that makes no sense, but I know what I mean. Okay, Carl, pass the first book over.
The Kraken and the Colossal Octopus by Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans. Now, the father of cryptozoology, we all know. He wrote On the Track of Unknown Animals and In the Wake of the Sea Serpents, but he wrote a whole slew of other books on relic hominins and other subjects like Giant Squid and Octopus that didn't get translated into English. Now this one got translated into English fairly late on, many decades after it was first written, and it came out at an appallingly inflated price. It's something ridiculous. We got it as a review copy. CFC got it as a review copy, but you know, your average Joe couldn't really afford it. It was over. What was it? Can you remember, John? It was over £100, wasn't it?
No, I thought it was I thought it was £98. It was stupid money. But I remember that they had that much smaller book. It was only about 100 pages long, and it was A5.
That was about the early cryptozoology, just before it was even called cryptozoology, like Willie Lay and people like that.
And that came out for £78. My review of it was that what I would suggest someone do was to go and shoplift the bloody thing and then photocopy it and pass the photocopies around. I thought it was absolutely appalling price-wise, and although Heuvelmans is, of course, he's the father of cryptozoology, he was originally our life president before John Blashford Snell. I knew him personally, and although he was quite a difficult man, he was certainly a great man. And I don't think he's been served well by the publishers.
Anyway, this book looks at the journey of the giant squid from being a mythological creature to being a creature accepted by science, and also looks at the possible existence of a giant octopus, unknown to science, which still is a cryptid. It's still unknown if it exists at all. It may or may not exist, but it looks at both of them. And very dear to my heart is a guy mentioned in here called Pierre de Montfort, who was a French biologist in the 18th century, who became an expert on molluscs, and he wrote many books on marine life and molluscs, and he worked for the Paris Natural History Museum and botanical gardens, and he went on all sorts of expeditions as far away as Egypt collecting specimens. He got talking to some whalers from Nantucket who had
Was one of them a girl?
no, they were all men.
But once was a girl from Nantucket. Sorry, carry on, Richard, I'm just being stupid. And by the way, that noise is not our microphone's functioning. It is the dog who has decided, for some reason, to wander around the sitting room, grooming himself and making big clacky sounds with the name tag that's hanging down off his collar.
Anyway, Pierre de Montfort, he got talking to some whalers from Nantucket who had moved to Paris, and they told him about finding great circular sucker marks on the bodies of sperm whales, and dying sperm whales vomiting up huge tentacles 40, 50 feet long. And he came to the conclusion that there was an undiscovered species of giant squid, and he believed that there was a giant squid and a giant octopus, which were both unknown to science, and that these were behind these stories of the Norse maritime monster, the Kraken. And because of this, he became a scientific pariah. He lost his job, he couldn't get work, everyone thought he was a madman for believing in sea monsters. He was reduced to selling seashells for a living, and living in a hovel that had a gravestone as a door that he used to pull over. It was like a single sort of stone cell that he used to live in. And this man, who was once, you know, a well-respected scientist and, you know, the darling of the scientific world, at the end of the 18th century and the start of the 19th century, he ended up in 1820 starving to death in a Parisian gutter, all because he postulated the existence of the giant squid. And then in the 1850s, the giant squid specimen was finally captured, and it was proven that Pierre de Montfort was right all along, but everybody else got the glory, and he was forgotten. He was just a footnote in scientific history, and it's high time he was he had his reputation restored and his work recognised.
It would have been fitting if they'd called the new squid Architeuthis de Montforti rather than ducks.
Well, it wasn't an Architeuthis, it was a different type of squid. You mean the colossal squid?
No, the original giant squid.
Oh, the original giant squid.
Yeah,
Architeuthis ducks. They should have called it Architeuthis
de Montforti.
Yeah.
There is some controversy whether the Architeuthis ducks and whether Architeuthis ducks, the giant squid, and the colossal squid are two different species or not.
Oh, they are definitely two different species. The colossal squid has been known for years and years and years, but nobody knew it grew that big. They've got specimens of it before, but they never knew it grew as large as it did. It's a different family of squid from Architeuthis.
Masonic Architeuthis.
Yeah, Masoniteuthis hamiltoni.
Yeah.
And I assume it looks
different as well.
completely different.
Yeah, it's got a rounder head, a more flattened, rounder head than the giant squid.
It's only got small arms as well, hasn't it?
It's got its arms are less long.
I've also read the speculation that there are other species of Architeuthis in different parts of the world waiting to be discovered. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, well, people have postulated that, and also that Architeuthis dux gets a lot bigger than we think it does. I mean, the biggest specimen we know about washed up on Thimbletickle Bay. What a great name, Thimbletickle Bay, in Newfoundland in the 1860s. That was 60 feet long, 20-foot body, and then 40 foot of tentacles.
Just to put it into context, I'm 6 foot tall, so that's 10 of me in a row.
It's about twice the length of a bus.
How long is this room, would you say?
This room is about 12 foot.
No, more than that, isn't it? God, there's 4 of these, it's 5 of these rooms. Wow. That's that's all the way from the bottom of the street up to the church.
There are reports of bigger ones, much bigger ones, which are covered in this book, and also the giant octopus.
What do you think about the giant octopus? Because the most famous specimen is the St. Petersburg beach.
The St. Augustine.
St. Augustine.
Yeah, that turned out to be part of a sperm whale, the head of a sperm whale.
Yeah, but there are people who still believe.
There are people who say they've seen octopi much bigger than anything recorded. In the Caribbean, there's a tradition of something called the lusca that lives down there. There's holes called the blue deeps that's supposed to be gigantic, and the description of it sounds like a cirrate octopus, and cirrate octopuses have these weird wing-like fins on their bodies that make them look a bit like Great Cthulhu, and instead of having suckers arranged in rows of 2, they have one big sucker instead of 2 suckers, and little feelers either side of the sucker. And one of the names for the lusca is the hairy hands, because it's supposed to have these feelers on its tentacles. It sounds like a gigantic cirrate octopus.
An episode or so back, and you must forgive me, but I'm beginning to get confused which episode's which. But an episode or so back, we talked to Richard and Carl about the archive of the work of Odette Chernin, which the CFZ has just been lucky enough to buy. While we were talking about Odette Chernin, Richard dropped a bombshell. Well, it was a bombshell to me because he told me that a lady who we both had held in enormously high esteem had just died. And so I asked him to explain a bit more about why Marie-Jeanne Koffmann was so important.
There are too many people who call themselves cryptozoologists who never do field work. They just sit in front of a computer at their keyboard. I've never had time for that. Proper cryptozoologists do field work. They get their boots dirty, they get their hands dirty, boots on the ground, in the field. That's what it's all about. That's what I live for, hunting these creatures in the field. And perhaps the greatest field researcher in the history of cryptozoology was Marie-Jeanne Koffmann, and she has just passed away 11 days shy of her 102nd birthday, which is an incredible innings for anybody. She was born in France. She was half French, half Russian. Born in France, moved to Moscow, became a medical doctor and a surgeon working in hospitals in Moscow, and she was very interested in her spare time in mountaineering, and she was doing a lot of mountaineering. Then in the Second World War she fought for Russia against the Nazis and became a commander of a group of soldiers and fought very bravely, in fact. Then bizarrely, after World War II, because of mountaineering expeditions in remote areas, she was accused of being a French spy, even though she'd risked her life fighting for Russia against the Nazis. And she spent a number of years in a gulag until she was vindicated and set free. And one of the people, apparently, who argued for her was Boris Brezhnev, the famous Russian polymath and hominologist. And shortly after being set free, she became involved with the Snowman Commission, which was the former USSR's official government group set up to study the problem of relic hominins. And she first heard about the Yeti and other creatures like that in a article in a magazine on mountaineering, and she knew several of the people involved in this article who said they'd believe this creature existed. So that's how she first got interested, and she was chosen along with Boris Brezhnev and several others to make the initial forays into the Pamir Mountains in search of the Almasty, the Russian wild man. And the commission itself was unique. No other government has ever done this. And as well as Boris Brezhnev and Dmitry Bayanov, they had Peter Smolin, who's a very famous scientist in Russia, and a bunch of other people, all based at the Darwin Museum in Moscow, taking this seriously. And after negative results in the Pamirs, they decided to concentrate on the Caucasus Mountains. And then for the next 40 odd years, Marie-Jeanne Koffmann worked in the Caucasus, interviewing witnesses, climbing up the mountains, exploring the valleys and the forests, gathering whatever evidence she could. She only saw the Almasty once at a distance, but she interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people that had actually seen it. And our old friend Gregory Panchenko, who we went to Russia with, who was our guide on the Almasty expedition to Russia, he went on a couple of her later expeditions, and she was working well into the 90s, into the 1990s, and she had retired when she got to a certain age, and she was at the time of her death living in a old people's home in France, but she still had all her mental faculties. A couple of years ago she won Cryptozoologist of the Year, which was long overdue. What I'm worried about now is her work. She never published a book. She had a synthesis of her research published in a French magazine called Archaeologica, but she never wrote a book, and she's got literally lifetimes worth, around 50 years worth of research notes, and I'm hoping that these can be preserved, that they're not just going to end up in a dustbin. I hope they're going to be donated to somewhere to be used as a tool for future researchers, and maybe even publish as a series of books. But she was a remarkable woman. I would have loved to have met her, and she's one of my cryptozoological heroines. If you want to support us and help us make more content like this, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page, and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who is a regular visit to the studio, wants me to remind you, always remember to ring the notification bell. Otherwise, you won't be told when we've got a new show available. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is about it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it edifying and informative, and any other long words that I can think of. I was asked the other day why the episode we did with the Trout Spectacular was quite so silly. And that was because we had made the show before that, the one about Zena and her tragic true story. And it was something that really, in which it was totally inappropriate to do anything even slightly frivolous. It is a disgusting story of human greed. And if there was any justice in this world, and I know there isn't much justice in this world anywhere, but if there is any justice in this world, if it is proven that Zaina's family, whether or not they are all villagers in this little village in Abkhazia, or whether they are a tribe of hitherto unsuspecting descendants of one-time slaves living in the Georgian mountains, whether or not either of these are true, then they are definitely the sort of people who really should be given a large and generous financial recompense for the crimes done to their ancestors. Take that as you will. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who helped with this episode, particularly, who's it been this time? It's been Richard, and it's been Carl, it's been Louis, and behind the scenes it's been Maxine and Charlotte and Sarah. And has there been anybody else? Yes, probably. Well, I do apologise if I've forgotten you, because I am a silly old man who's rapidly going into his dotage, and my memory is absolutely appalling, so please forgive me if I've forgotten you. Now, I know that's the end of this episode, but never fear, because in 7 days, guess who'll be back gracing your screens? Yes, me! Because Saturday afternoons is CFZ on the Track day, and on Saturday afternoons I present you with a hopefully entertaining and enlivening and enlightening potpourri of Fortean zoological strangeness. And yes, sometimes it does have all sorts of silly things in, including songs, jokes, and funny hats. So, if you want to wait and see if in next week's episode there will be songs, jokes, or funny hats, I can't tell you yet because I haven't written it yet. But I do know one thing, next Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I am going to be there. And by the way, me and Louis and V and various other members of the CFZ team are usually to be found on premiere day answering your questions and doing a live chat, so you can find us on the right hand side of the screen. So I'm going to be there next Saturday. Are you going to be there? Because if I'm going to be there, now the way round. If you're going to be there and I'm there, well, I'll be seeing you.